Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the inner workings of the creative process. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. Linda King caught the travel bug at an early age. She also grew up in a family of writers. After working in the travel and banking industries and discovering that there was an appetite for her travel advice, she started The Smart Travelista, a website and series of travel books to help people travel wisely and save money doing it. Linda tells me more about that journey and about her more recent foray into creative nonfiction, and also offers some travel tips and a pep talk for anyone who needs a little motivation to give travel a try. We also talk about how travel influences your creative process. Here's my conversation with Linda King. Linda, welcome to Follow Your Curiosity. I'm really glad you're here today.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So I always start everybody out with the same question, which is, were you a creative kid, or did you discover your creative side later on in life?
I was always a creative kid. I was the one in school that was writing short stories, funny short stories. Probably the first story I can remember writing was about my nana, my grandmother, and about her neighbour and the relationship they had together, which was quite a funny relationship, a bit of a love-hate relationship, but observing it as a child and then writing a story about it. So I've always been creative, I think, even as a child. I think with what I'm doing now, probably started doing it seriously in the last 5 years, but always had ideas, always had story ideas, my imagination always running wild with different stories. And I would write them down, but I think seriously probably in the last 5 years, and I've done probably more with it.
Fair enough. Did anybody encourage you when you were writing those stories as a kid, or would they just kind of think, oh, this is just her little kid thing and no big deal?
It's funny because I come from a family of writers. Mm-hmm. So my grandmother wrote a children's book. I've got a cousin on my father's side who's a journalist. And both my father and his uncle and his brother were writers. So I think it might have been in the blood.
Sounds like.
Yeah. So, but I think as a kid, I think as a kid you're really innocent, and I think you're really receptive to creativity. I think when you get a little bit older, it's like, okay, well, I've got to work, got to do this for work and all that. But as a kid, you get more freer, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I used to write a lot of short stories, and I think my father still got probably all of them that I wrote. But
oh wow!
But yeah, I think you know what I think, Nancy. I think everyone's creative. It's just whether they tap into it or not.
Yes.
So I think everyone's born with it, and I think if you learn how to tap into it, it's marvelous.
Absolutely. Did the other writers in your family inspire you in any way, whether they knew it or not?
I think they might have. Yeah, I think growing up seeing that, and I think growing up reading a lot, because obviously if you're a writer, you need to do a lot of reading as well. But I think I did a lot of reading as a kid, and always probably in the background, that we talk about my uncle and my grandmother and the writing that they were doing. So I think you absorb everything as a child, I think, and then you become what you become later on. But with all that influence, I think.
Right. And you ended up in fields that we don't tend to think of as being writing related fields.
Yeah. So it's funny, with the writing, there was all the other influences in my life. So as a child, we did a lot of traveling. And so that influenced me as well. So as a child, we went around Australia on a 4-month road trip, my family, and that really opened my mind. I was like, this is amazing. I want to do this as a life, if I can. So I think probably the writing took a bit of a back step to the travelling. But then, within the last few years, I think they've married up really nicely, the writing as well as the travelling. So I think, it happens when it's meant to happen, I think.
Absolutely. And I want to talk at some point about how the traveling influences the writing and vice versa, because I'm so very sure that it does. But I know you also worked as a banker, and I'm curious to, also mean that you kind of, for want of a better word, abandoned the creative side for a while, or were you still doing creative things on your off hours?
Yeah, I've always been doing creative things. So I think what happened was I was in the travel industry, then left the travel industry, and then went into banking and sort of more finance. The writing was still on the periphery. It's funny because with the travel and then also the money management, that's how the Smart Travelista became, because it was another thing that my family are really good at is money managers. They're really good at money. So I think that was also another influence. So we go back to the childhood, all these influences. So I've always been really good with money also. So that sort of attracted me with the banking. It was like, okay, let me see what I can, learn more about. So yeah, the Smart Travelista is sort of the blending of the travel, also the money management. And the writing fits in really nicely as well. So I think you gravitate to things that you're interested in, I think, in life. And you might have a passion. So my passion, writing as well as traveling, but also who doesn't like money, right? And we like making money and maybe learning how to save it is always been a thing with me, especially, I don't know, when you go shopping. I'm a bit of a shopper. The challenge for me is to find something really, really valuable for a really low cost. And I really enjoy that as well. So, but yeah, I think the influence that you have in life, you become, I think, sort of mold you, and you become what you end up sort of being. I know life's a bit of a journey, but it's, you tend to blend in with everything that you've had influences with, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious because the idea of a 4-month trip around anywhere is something that sounds so immediately out of reach to a lot of people. And I'm curious if you know how it is that your family, found the resources to make that happen.
My father was banking up all his annual leave, so he had been at a company for quite a long time, and they had a lot of long service leave. So his idea, and it was just his idea at the time, he thought, right, we're going to get in the car, we're going to pay for the petrol, we'll have a tent, so we'll tent everywhere. We might caravan, do the van as well. And then if we're really lucky, we might stay in a motel. That was sort of our sort of special for the trip. But yeah, his idea was he wanted to go around Australia and see as much as he could in 4 months. We as children were quite pleased because we weren't going to be at school for 4 months.
Right.
But what we didn't know was that he went to the teachers and got all our homework for the 4 months.
Sneaky dad.
sneaky dad. And then so we had a table that we used to sit on, have our meals, with the tent and everything. And he goes, I've got a surprise for you. And I went, oh, okay. He goes, you've got homework to do tonight. And I was like, oh, surprise. Not a good surprise. So
right.
me and my brother just looked at each other and went, but it was good because we didn't miss any school. And then when we got it back, we were probably ahead because of all the content the teachers had given him. So that was good. And you can't buy the life education that we had travelling around and seeing everything that we saw. Like, you can't put a price on that. So it was a really, really good experience, one that I'll always remember, I think.
Are there things from that experience that you still draw on now?
Yeah, it was the first time I'd ever met Indigenous people. And they are the most loveliest people that you could ever meet. Just the pristine scenery and the just the outback. We'd never seen Red Earth before. We'd never seen Uluru. Just so many things. And the Great Australian Bight. Between Perth and the east coast of Australia, you have this Great Australian Bight, which is the southern bit, and it's sort of like the bit out part of Australia where you can bite it, and there's like a big bite mark there. The scenes there and the water and just, yeah, it was just mind blowing. As a kid, we were like, we just didn't believe we were there. And the thing about the Nullarbor Plains, so you go across the Great Australian Bight, but from Perth through to the east coast, you don't see many people because it's such a vast stretch of land and road. So if we saw someone, we'd be like this, waving to them because we hadn't seen anyone for at least a few hours. But, you know, we gold mined in Kalgoorlie. So that's a really, really big industry now for Western Australia.
Wow.
With all the gold mining. But, you know, we'd had our metal detectors and we were trying to find gold, and we found, you know, probably a few old rusty nails, and we found some really nice old style bottles, like blue, really bright blue bottles from, you know, the early 1900s, 1800s. So as you know, as it rains, a lot of the things are hidden under the ground. But when we were using the metal detector, we were finding all these little things. But I found this blue bottle. I remember Dad said to us, be really careful when you find anything that's blue. Just, you know, you don't be too hard when you're digging in there. I found a bottle, an old-fashioned bottle. Apparently it was worth a lot of money, and this lady in the town said, I'll pay $50 for the bottle. And I said to my father, I think this bottle's valuable. I'm keeping it.
Good for you.
But and I've still got the bottle, but it was just amazing. It was, I can't put it into words, Nancy. It was just such an amazing trip that we went on, and I think it probably started me on my travel journey for the rest of my life, really.
It sounds amazing. I'm sitting here trying not to turn too green on you with envy, because I can't imagine what that, you know, how that must have felt to have that much time to just go and explore and see places, especially in Australia where things are so different depending on where you are. It just, wow.
Yeah.
Good for your dad.
Yeah. And good for him. And I think my life might have turned out differently had we not had that experience, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you went into the travel industry and then you left, which kind of surprises me since you're so, you know, travel centric. So I'm curious to know how that was.
Yeah. So I was born in Sydney, and the airline that I worked for had the head office in Sydney. So I moved down to Melbourne for personal reasons, and then there was no jobs. So what I did was used a lot of my transferable skills and went into that industry. And as it turned out, jobs then became available. So I sort of went back into the airline industry and actually going back into it again. So I'm going back to my roots. So it's funny how the circle goes round. But I think sometimes you've just got to take your opportunities. So if, you know, in the industry that you've got the experience in, the jobs aren't available, okay, you've got transferable skills. What can you do? Because obviously you're still got to earn money and pay the bills. But I'm glad that I did it because it showed me that the skills that I've got can be transferred through to different industries, which I think is very powerful in your career because you can be in one industry for the whole of your life. And then if something happens to that industry, you could be stuck and not be able to, get another job. So I think it's worked out in a really great way because I've tested myself, challenged myself, probably learned a few things as well along the way, which has then made me more valuable for going back into the travel industry. So, I don't regret anything, Nancy, in life. I think your journey's sometimes predestined, I think. I think you've got choices in life, but the choices you make sort of then I think there's always going to be a benefit from that. There's positive outcomes of that. So the positive out of going out of the travel industry and going into other industries has meant that I've learned a lot of skills, a lot of different things that now make me more valuable to an employer. So, yeah, it's funny how your career and life go, but never regret. That's my big thing about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
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 So then how did you come to start the Smart Travelista?
So it's really funny. I used to get asked quite a few tips from family and friends. And then I was on a trip through Europe, probably just before COVID. And I was getting asked tips all the time from other travelers. You get into conversations with people. And they were like, we know you were on that flight, but how did you get out so quickly? I was traveling in business class, and they wanted to know how I was traveling in business class.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was other places that I'd stayed at that were, 5-star, and I was getting them really cheaply. So I was getting asked all these questions. And one lady said to me when I was in Dubai, she said, do you have a blog? Do you have a website? Or have you got, do you write about this stuff? And I went, I don't. But I was having a lot of these conversations. And then I thought to myself, on the flight back to London, I thought, I have to write all this down. So look, it's common, I don't know, it's common sense to me because I've got all this travel expertise, but to other people it's not. So that's when I started writing it down, and I got the outline for the first book done on that flight. And then it just led from there. And then so what I did was the books that I write are topics that are going to resonate with the traveller. So if I was putting myself in those shoes and going, okay, what would be a book that I'd really want to read to save me money on certain aspects of travel? And that's the sort of books that I've written. So I've written 4 books in the Smart Travelista series. I've got a 5th one coming out also probably within the next month. But they're all on topics that resonate with people. So everyone wants to learn how to save money before they travel and then also while they're traveling. One big thing that I use a lot of is airline miles. Mm-hmm. So I've written a book about that. Health and safety is always a really important one if you're traveling solo, and health especially, with everything we've been through. And then the next one that I'm bringing out is about food allergies, which I'm a food allergy sufferer. And there's a lot of people out there that I've spoken to that suffer food allergies. So I'm bringing that one out shortly. But also I've done something a little bit different, and I've got a bit of a travel short stories books that I've brought out well, which just got launched this week, called Annex Abroad. So, yeah, I'm stretching myself as a writer. So, obviously I focus on the travel tips in the series, but also looking at creative nonfiction now. So I think as a writer, you've got to challenge yourself because, you grow and you learn, I think, if you do that. So, but yeah, it's just, I don't know whether this makes sense, Nancy, but it's all up here. All the knowledge is up here, and I'm just translating it into a book, but making it in a nice, attractive package, and
Sure.
and a nice read for somebody. Yeah.
Well, you're definitely into territory that interests me because when I started this podcast, my original idea was to use it as an excuse to travel and to go around to different places and meet creative people and then say, tell me your story. And when you're done, tell me who else I should talk to. And that'll be the next stop on wherever I go. Except that obviously that requires a bunch of money that I did not have when I started the podcast. So Zoom it is. But yeah, I love to go anywhere that I can get away with going. I usually travel on my own, which sometimes when I was in New Zealand staying in an Airbnb with an older couple, they told me I was the bravest person they'd ever met. And I thought, I'm really not, but okay. But, I'm not big on package tours and things like that. I want to be able to go out and explore things on my own. And if you put me on a tour bus for too long, it's not good for anybody.
Yes.
So I'm always curious to know about what else I might not know when it comes to picking a destination or how to get there without going broke or anything like that. But I'm wondering, like, what things have people asked you that have surprised you the most, or just surprised you that you think are noteworthy?
I think one thing that I think is really untapped and thing that I get asked about is the miles, how to do that. And like I've been doing it for a long time. I was one of the jobs in the travel industry was as a travel agent. So I used to teach other people how to do it. So that's one big tip that I get asked a lot about. People don't know where to start with it, how to actually get into it. And yeah, it's just about taking it step by step. So you've really got to think about, okay, what airline am I traveling most on?
Mm-hmm.
And that's potentially then joining up with their program and then doing a bit of an analysis and a bit of research and seeing what fits in with your lifestyle. And then it becomes a no-brainer after that. Just, using the partners that'll get you the points. Thing that surprised me, someone actually asked me the most amount of money that I'd saved on an airline ticket. And I would have to say business class. So what I do is I save my points up to go to long haul because Australia is so far away from everywhere else. And so I would normally save my points up for London. So if I paid for an airfare from, say, Melbourne to London, business class, I'm probably looking about $6,000, $7,000. For me, building the points up and then utilising them to get a business class ticket is a massive saving for me. And it just gives you all that extra money to spend on other things.
Absolutely.
But one thing I would say that I think is what everyone should do is use their points or build points and then use them. But I've got so many other travel tips that I could share. So, I mean, one big thing, and the travel agents won't like me with this, but book it online yourself. You're going to save so much money. And yes, it takes a bit of organisation and a bit of research and a bit of time, but that time's money really well spent. What else could I tell you? People make the mistake of travelling in peak season, which is when the prices are most expensive. And what I would say is try, if you can, do low and shoulder seasons. Obviously, the weather's probably not as nice, so it might be a little bit colder or a bit more rainier, but it's also going to save you a lot of money. But, yeah, no question is really off limits when people ask me for travel tips. It's funny, I get common questions, and then they end up being book titles, the common ones I get asked. And then people come through and then say to me, I'd like to know about this. I was like, okay, well, that's another book title as well. So it's really good, Nancy, with engaging with people and people engaging with you. Some of the best ideas come from conversations that you've had with people. And I'm one for keeping note of every idea. I think as a writer, and you'll probably think the same, once you open up the floodgates with your creativity, it just doesn't stop. Inspiration just comes flowing out of you. And I have notebooks everywhere, and also obviously my mobile. And I write down things because if you don't write them down, you'll forget. And then you can use that as a building block for something, whether that be a blog post or a new book.
So when you started putting the books together, did you think that you were just doing one book, or did you realize that you had a bunch of different topics that would lend themselves to a series right off the bat?
You know what? At that point in time, I thought it was just going to be the one book. But then as it sort of went organically from that, I just realised, well, the first book, there's so many topics that I speak about in the first book that I could actually make books out of them. And it was only after the fact of publishing that one, I thought, yeah, there's absolutely some more books that I can write. And then that, just turned into a series after that.
And how do you find writing the travel book, since that's a nonfiction kind of writing, versus your fiction writing? Is the process
very
similar?
different.
Okay.
Very different, because they're not different. Writing's writing. But I think with this series, it's more about informational guides. So it's more, probably more, it's non-fiction, but it's probably not, it's not business writing and it's not academic writing. It's sort of more conversational how-to books. creative non-fiction, you're putting a bit more of a story into that. So with the other books, you are putting a bit of a story in, but it's more informational content, tips, strategies, and all that sort of thing. With the other one, the creative non-fiction, there's more showing and telling, and all that sort of stuff. So you're showing and you're creating a picture for the reader and taking them through the journey of what happened in that story. So it is a little bit different. And I think it's a little bit more challenging also too, because you're using more of your writing in it. Not to say that the other writing's not good, but it serves its purpose. It's more of a travel and guide. The other one is you want to make it entertaining for people. You want it to be something that they're going to go away and be entertained by, have a bit of a laugh about. So, yeah, it is a little bit different. But I've actually enjoyed doing it because it's now giving me ideas about other things that I can get into. So, yeah, it's sort of like the writing journey started one place, but it's going down the path and leading into other things. And I think as a writer, in my opinion, to be a good writer, you should be able to do all sorts of things, not just one. But, one thing might be your lane and you might like that. But for me, I like to be challenged. So, and it's good because I'm constantly writing, whether it's I'm writing a blog, I'm writing content for my website, or I'm writing a book. It's building that writing muscle. Mm-hmm. And I feel that as you go along, you're getting better and better.
Definitely. How does your blog influence your travel book series, or are they completely different things for you?
Some of the blog articles, I've had ideas, like people have said to me, can you write about this? So they've sent me a communication going, I would really love it if you could write about this. Also through conversations on social media. So the allergy book came about because someone had actually had a conversation with me, and it's something that I suffer from. And, not everyone suffers, but, you've got a percentage of people that do. And firstly, I wrote a blog post about that and got a really good reception. And I thought, absolutely need to write a book about this, expand on that. So I think some of the blog posts that I've done have ended up being books. But you started as a blog. And I've actually noticed that a lot of other authors have done that too. They've had a blog and they've written blog posts that have then sort of gone into and become a book. So I think it's like a bit of a tester, I suppose. You send something out to the universe and see what sort of reception you get. Mm-hmm. And I'm big one on research. So I ask questions on social media and I get responses back. And then it gives me a little bit of a trend on what's happening out there, and whether there would be a need for that information as well. So I think use all the tools that you've got. So communication you've got with people, the social media, people responding on your blogs. I think it's all very helpful and useful. And then, if you want to expand on that, then that becomes something more.
Do people come to you on social media and say, can you write a post about, I'm sure they do now that I'm asking this question that might be kind of silly, but I'm just wondering, since you're asking them questions, is it a real back and forth, or does it mostly stay in the vicinity of whatever you've asked?
No, back and forth all the time. I actually what happens is people come by my website and they'll send me a message. And one lady said to me, because I write about travel, but then I sometimes do a few blogs about writing because I think it's good to put tips out there about that. Mm-hmm. She asked me, she said, can you write about tips for new writers? And I thought, wow, that's a great idea for a blog post. So I did a blog on that. But it came from someone sending me a message via my website and saying, I really love your blog. I would really love if you could write about, do a blog about this. They ask, I deliver. So, but yeah, I really love the engagement, whether it's via people sending me messages or whether it's via social media or even, talking on a podcast. The engagement is wonderful because I always get ideas from any sort of engagement that I have with anybody. And I think it's wonderful, actually. And I love it. Like, people give me feedback. And I just think, well, it's worthwhile. When you get that feedback from people, you think, what I'm doing is valuable and people are liking it. It just gives you the momentum to keep going.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good energy source.
Absolutely. And, I know there's a bad side of social media. I don't get involved in that. I always try and look for the positive out of it. And I've got so much out of it that I think it's a wonderful, if you use it for the right reasons, it's absolutely wonderful. And great communities, like travel and writing communities, amazing. Like, the support that you get from each other and the support you give each other, it's just priceless. It's really, really good.
That's great. I can actually see you ending up writing a book about, how to write a blog, or even how to stay on the good side of social media. I think a lot of people would love to know how to do that.
Yeah. I better write that down now. Yeah, absolutely.
So have you ever done any sort of standard travel writing? I mean, you have the creative, short story nonfiction side, but have you ever done like magazine articles or anything about destinations?
No, I haven't. But it's something that I'm looking into. I think having a full-time job, this travel sort of is my side hustle. So there's never enough hours in the day to do everything. But absolutely, yeah, I think absolutely writing for magazines. It's always good to add to your portfolio, right? I did a travel writing course, which was really, really invaluable. There was some people that taught us that were actually travel writers for magazines in Australia.
Oh, great.
And it was such a great course, but it's something that I haven't officially done. But yeah, what I'm looking at now, I'm looking at travel from a different perspective now when I travel. I'm thinking, okay, what can I do once I get back, whether it's the blogs, whether it's, looking at the photos. I'm probably looking at travel. I know it's leisure also, but I'm looking at more of a business perspective now and thinking, okay, what can I do on this trip? What ideas for articles can I write? Blog posts? Will it be a book? And I'm looking at it from that perspective, which I didn't do when I first started travel. But I suppose it's because I'm now in the business that I look at it from this perspective. But it's not to say that I'm not going to enjoy as well the trips, but I'm also going to look at what I can, make content from as well. So, yeah, absolutely. Looking at the magazines, I think that will be in my future, writing articles for them as well.
How did you end up making that leap from writing the how-to guides to writing the creative?
So the stories were percolating in my mind probably for a few years.
Oh, wow.
So I'd written a few of them really, really rough drafts. And then there was a few other, and as you travel, you think of the experiences that you've had. So the book is more about it's called Antics Abroad. So it's antics, obviously, when things don't go so right when you're traveling, because when things go perfect, that's pretty boring in my opinion. The things that go wrong are more entertaining. So there's some stories in there that actually happened to me, but there's stories of people that I've met as well. So it's a combination of the two, and their stories, because I've spoken, you obviously speak with people when you travel, and they've told me their stories. So some of their stories are in there as well. So it's probably a combination of the two. And I've tried to be as honest and true to what happened, but obviously make it in an entertaining sort of package. But yeah, they're all true stories. And I think they're entertaining. Some of them are, oh my God, I wouldn't I don't know whether I've ever been in this situation or whether I want to be in that situation again. But yeah, they're just a bit of a collection of short stories. And yeah, I think it's really about the people that I've met. I think they're the ones that bring the book to life. Obviously I've had some situations as well, but it's the people that you meet. I think that's an important part of travel. The people that you meet make the travel, the experiences that you have, and the unknown, right? We go out there, we might have a plan about our trip, but then the unknown might happen. It's unknown to us, right?
Yeah.
You don't expect bad things to happen to you when you travel. If you get out of them, that's great. Obviously, I got out of them because I'm talking to you right now. But you always learn from those experiences, I think. You learn stuff about yourself. You learn that you've got strength that you didn't think you had. And it makes you, I think, it helps you in your travels, actually, going through those experiences. They might seem a bit frightening at the time, but then you look back at them and go, okay, well, I've learned something from that. I won't do that again. But yeah, no, it's the fun of travel, I think. And yeah, the book's about that. I think it's really celebrating travel and the things that happen to us when we travel.
In the process of writing those stories down, did you learn new things about those experiences or learn new things about travel in general?
I learned that it's always good to write it down when it happens because it becomes very fresh in your mind. But then in hindsight, when I was, obviously writing them, getting them together, I was quite shocked that how calm I was through a lot of the situations that happened. I'm a pretty calm person by nature, but yeah, I think I was probably calm, probably freaking out at the time, but calm if anyone saw me. But I think what really surprised me is that I must have 9 lives because some of these things could have ended my life at any point. But obviously I've got some angels up there looking out for me, or a cat with 9 lives. I don't know. But you can't push your luck too far, I think, in life, because if you take too many chances, then really bad things happen. But yeah, I think I must. I don't know. I feel like a cat with 9 lives. Actually, I'm not up to the 9th life yet, but I reckon I'm probably close to it. But yeah, it's funny looking back. You look back at it from a different perspective, I think, because time's passed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obviously more raw when it happens, I think. But that's the time to write down about it because you've got those emotions. It's raw. It's with memories over time. You might not be able to recall those feelings and those emotions. So I've learned that now when situations happen like that, I write them down immediately because the memory is always going to be fresher when it's just happened than if you think about it maybe a year or 2 down the track or even 5 years, But yeah, blown away, I think, with this one word. I think when you're young, you do some crazy things when you're younger. And I think that's probably youth, right? Mm-hmm. Would you do them when you're older? Maybe not, but when you're young, I don't know, you're a bit carefree and, yeah, you think you're invincible, right?
Yeah, you don't know any better. And sometimes that's not a bad thing, and sometimes it is.
That's right. I would agree with that.
Yeah. Is there something that, like a particular incident that you think of right off the top of your head in terms of, oh, I am never doing that again and no one else ever should either?
Yeah. never go to a country when there's a hurricane about to hit or it's hurricane season.
That sounds like good advice.
I thought I'd done my research, but obviously not. Yeah, that was an experience. So yeah, I've always remembered that lesson. If I'm going to go to the States, if it's, make sure it's not hurricane season where I'm planning to travel there. So yeah, but you live and learn. It was an experience.
Oh, absolutely. I bet.
We have similar, probably not as large as hurricanes, but we have cyclones in Australia, which is similar. So I knew about cyclones, but I'd never actually been in the middle of a hurricane. But, it was a live and learn experience. And look, I got a story out of it. So, in my book. So
yeah.
Not all bad, is it?
No, I think that's true of a lot of live and learn experiences. I don't think those tend to come without stories.
That's right. But yeah, look, I don't regret anything. I think all the experiences I've had made me who I am today. So,
Mm-hmm.
I can laugh about them now, and enjoy it, really. Enjoy the memories.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it, whether it's travel related or not, is just to say this made me part of who I am, and smarter this time, and won't do that again, but I survived. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So in general, as opposed to specifically in terms of those stories, have you noticed that traveling influences your creativity or vice versa?
I think it does. But I think I'm creative all the time. So, at the moment, obviously I'm not traveling, but I think the travel opens it up. I think because you're getting such a whirlwind of differences. So you might be traveling to a new country that you've never been to. You might have researched it and done all that before you've gone, but actually being there is a different circumstance altogether. So it's like, and I think you're very receptive to all the different newness and the differences to your own life, really. The different culture, it's a different place. People are different. So I think when I travel, that just goes up another notch. It just explodes because the ideas have kept running around in my head. And I think once I've opened up the creativity, since I've opened up my creativity officially, I've got all these ideas all the time. And, I pursue them and write. But I think because, one, also you're on holidays, you're relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Being relaxed, it tends to open it up even more, and then you get all these other ideas, and they just bombard you. And I find that I have multiple notebooks over there, and I'm just writing down ideas about blog ideas. If something happens, I'll write that down. It's just, I think the newness is what stimulates more of that sort of writing productivity and stimulates it. I think I'm open to anything. So, I could be at work and someone will say a comment, and then that comment, I will think about something else, which will lead into an idea. So it's like every day life can also give you those ideas. So, you have a conversation with somebody, and then that'll lead to something else. So it's what someone says then triggers something in your brain or your mind, and then that leads you down a path of another idea. So I can't turn it off, Nancy. It's on now all the time. I don't mind it, but it's just about capturing those ideas. And then sometimes I'll be at breakfast and something will come to me, and then I'll just be writing down while I'm eating my breakfast, because if it comes to me, I'll just write it down. And so it's like the shell of something. It might be shell of a blog post or of an idea, and then you just flesh that out later. So yeah, it's bizarre. Once you open this creativity, it just comes out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like you're living, right? You live and you breathe. It's just like that. It just comes out of you. I'm pretty sure other writers would say the same. You know, that there's things that their ideas and ideas for books and things come really, really organically just from, everyday life, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because as you're talking, it's occurred to me that travel, especially to a place you've never been before, but also if you haven't been there for a while, or is kind of like a palate cleanser for your eyes and the rest of
Yes.
your brain. But I'm thinking, what first occurred to me was, you go someplace new and literally everything you're seeing is new. And
Mm.
so many of us, we don't even see half the things that are in our house because they've just become part of the scenery. Whereas that doesn't happen when you're someplace new, because literally none of it is anything you've ever seen before. Maybe also never heard before or tasted before, or, whatever else may come with that. And I think, the challenge is to hang on to that sense of, oh, look, here's this thing I've had for 10 years, and I'm going to look at it like I've never seen it before when you get home. And I don't think any of us can really sustain that for too long, just because that's how our brains are wired. But I think that's part of what makes it so valuable to go somewhere else. It isn't just, I feel like going somewhere else. It's the way that it opens up all of your senses in different ways. And I think that helps all those synapses fire together. And I'm not a neuroscientist. I've never studied this. It just makes sense to me. So yeah, I think that is one of the things that we don't really think about when we travel, but it's happening because I've never seen the Eiffel Tower before. I've never seen the view from the top of the Eiffel Tower before. Or it's been 20 years since I was in Paris, and wow, I forgot how beautiful the Eiffel Tower is. Insert something else for Eiffel Tower as appropriate. But yeah, I think we don't think about that as, a creative tool, which you could employ even just by, driving 20 miles from your own town to a place you haven't visited before, just as much as flying halfway around the world.
Yeah, I think you're totally spot on, Nancy. I think it's the senses, and it just goes into overdrive, and it's because it's new. And I think that's stimulating as well. When you know your home, you know it well. It's not new, but that stimulation of a new place, it just, it fires everything up. And I'm so glad that it does. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think we don't appreciate it that way enough, and maybe we should appreciate that more.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So what's next for you?
What's next for me? Gosh, more books. I've got a few ideas for a few other books. I try and do 2 books a year. So I've just released the Annex Abroad one. The second one will be released later this month. And then I'll be working on my next 2 books for next year. So, and probably, I'm definitely getting some travelling in as well this year, which will do a little bit more stimulation and some more ideas. But also I was participating in a virtual travel event last year. So I'll probably end up doing that also at the end of this year as well, again. But yeah, attending events, writing some books, probably doing a few more interviews, plenty of things to keep me busy.
Sounds like it.
And just keep traveling.
Sounds like it. So is there anything you would say to encourage someone who's never really gone traveling before, or a tip for them if they're feeling nervous or intimidated about maybe hopping on a plane and flying across an ocean for the first time?
Be brave. You can do it. Take it in baby steps. If you haven't been overseas before, go somewhere local, somewhere that is close to where you are, might be interstate, and do that as a trial and see how you go. And then when you go on that international trip, you will have done, a trip already, so you'll have that confidence. But I just say be brave. There is a wonderful world out there just waiting to be explored and to be visited. you're missing out if you don't explore and visit. They say if you don't travel, you're only reading one chapter of a book.
Ooh.
That's what I think travel's like. The book is full of all these chapters. Life is full of chapters. And if you might not want to travel, and that's fine too. But if you don't travel, you're not reading those other chapters in the book.
That's a great metaphor.
I would say just do it. You'll be fine. And just think about all the great things that are going to come from your travels, it's life-changing. So just do it.
I will heartily second all of that. I agree completely. Most of the best things I've ever done have involved getting on a plane and going somewhere. So
yeah.
I am a big fan of expanding your horizons that way. So,
absolutely.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with all of us. I think this has been great. You've inspired me to figure out where I'm going next.
Great. It was lovely chatting with you, Nancy.
That's our episode. Thanks so much to Linda King and to you for listening. I hope you're inspired to travel somewhere, whether near or far, and will leave a review for this episode. There's a link in your podcast app telling us about how travel has impacted your life. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Thanks so much. I talk to people all the time who are feeling totally lost, overwhelmed, and stuck creatively. And I know there are lots more of you out there who are feeling the same way. So I made something to help. Check out the link in your podcast app for my creative tune-up kit. It's $37, super affordable, and it's full of my favorite coaching tools to help you rediscover your creative self and make progress fast. I would love to get it into your hands so that you can get unstuck and create beautiful things this year. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners.